So this was on Christmas Day. A truck just blew up in Nashville out of nowhere.
Well, it was an RV, and supposedly it was around 6:30 in the morning on 2nd Avenue and Commercial Street, and it injured 3 people, but I think as of yet they've only found the remains of one person, which they've managed to identify as Anthony Warner, I believe, and supposedly the 3 people who are injured is nothing severe, and the police were managed to evacuate beforehand because there was a blaring siren that was saying, beware, there's about to be a bomb that's going to go off, supposedly about 15 minutes beforehand. And I think the intention of the siren going off from the RV was to clear away all the people, just so that there would be damages to businesses. And supposedly lots of businesses have been damaged, including an AT&T building, which was supposedly the main target, and also there was lots of collateral damage with, I believe, a tattoo parlour being severely damaged, and the owner said that the damage is essentially irreparable to the business. So it is a major explosion, and they're saying that it's definitely deliberate. And
So the fact that he's had that siren going tells you he wasn't trying to target people.
yeah,
So that's how did they get to the AT&T building being the target from that?
well, it was where the actual RV detonated, so it was driving around for quite some time, and because of the warning, everyone was moving away from it. No one was trying to stop it, so they're assuming that, you know, it was his plan to explode the RV there, and if I get onto it a bit later, they say that he actually has links to AT&T, and he has a motivation.
Like he has links to ISIS. Sorry.
Yeah, I did make it sound a bit bad, but no, he has reason to be distrustful of AT&T. So far, that they're still looking for members of the public to give more information about it, and they're still looking into it. I think the actual message that they said was, evacuate now, there is a bomb is in this vehicle, the vehicle will explode. Would you be able to get the video up?
So this is the video of what went on.
Yeah.
This area must be evacuated now. This area must be evacuated now. This area must be evacuated now.
Yeah, so you can hear the siren saying, "Get away."
Yeah, and I think you get to see the explosion as well, which is going to be very loud, so beware.
Headphone users. Did the camera cut out?
It did, it goes white, but you can't see it on the screen for some reason. I think that's enough. That hurts my ears now.
Yeah,
Ow.
so that's Christmas Day for a lot of these people sat there.
Yeah, they only actually managed to get to see their businesses today. The whole area had been cordoned off, so they're only recently kind of tallying the damages, so we don't actually know the full extent to the damages caused to all the businesses there. But we do know at least that only Anthony Warner was killed in the attack.
That's the bomber, I presume.
Yeah. And there was also a song being played, which was Downtown by Petula Clark, which the opening lyric is, when you're alone and life is making you lonely, and then it goes...
Go downtown. Yeah, I know the
there
song.
we go. I didn't know, I had to listen to it beforehand, but
Okay.
it seems to be giving away his motivation a little bit there. It seems like it's an attack of someone who had nothing left to live for, and I'll get onto why I think that in a minute.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very political.
No, although, I mean, the fact that he's targeted AT&T, there was a link to Dominion being audited by AT&T, wasn't there? But supposedly the FBI doesn't seem to think it's motivated by that necessarily, and also the Nashville AT&T weren't actually the ones doing it, so they think that theory can kind of be written off.
So that's sort of a leftist theory that he's some kind of Trump supporter who's bombing.
Yeah, but
Okay.
there's no evidence to suggest that yet. and that there is more evidence to suggest that he might be a kind of 5G conspiracy theorist, though, because AT&T were responsible for the rollout of 5G, and there are people who had worked with him that had suggested that he was into conspiracy theories. But there is also kind of a weird conflict where there's a realtor who had worked with him for about 5 years, and he was saying that he was a really nice guy. He would come in and consult and help me with IT and tech, and he saw no underlying abnormality in the guy. So there's a weird kind of mismatch between what some people have said and about him in his career, and perhaps people who knew him in private. Like his neighbour said that he was a conspiracy nut and he was really into all different kinds of conspiracies. So it's difficult to know who to take, but it's a fairly feasible argument to say that he kept his beliefs very quiet in his work life and perhaps was more open about it in his private life. But it's difficult to say as of yet. If we have a look at the BBC video, you can see that there are police just kind of hanging around waiting to see what's going to happen. And
So this is another video we're going to play?
yeah.
It's just loading, sorry.
Oh, I had a bit of trouble loading this BBC video up for some reason.
Not playing? Well, okay then. So the police officers are just standing around, and then the bomb goes
Oh,
off,
here we
or-
go.
Ah.
So he's kind of just wandering around. This is when the siren's actually going off, so you can see that they're not taking it very seriously. And as you can see, if that guy hadn't walked away when he did, he might have got hit by some debris there. So I think the police didn't really know what they were reacting to on the ground, and I believe quite a few of them were evacuating buildings and disregarding their own safety just to try and clear people out, which I'll go into a bit more later. So just to reiterate, they have matched the DNA of Anthony Warner with DNA found outside of the zone, so they know for certain it is him that carried out the attack. I know a couple of days ago they were speculating, but we can confirm it is him now. And they also believe it was intentional. I mean, especially with the size of the blast, it's very difficult to say, okay, this was an accident, because it's affected a huge portion of the street. If I'll go onto a map in a minute. There he is, pictured there. I believe he's 63. I think he worked as an IT consultant. And if we go on to the explosion location, I'll show you roughly where it is. You can see here, that's where it exploded, next to the AT&T building there. And if you could zoom out a little bit, maybe, you can see that the BBC video that we just watched, the police
There's
officer
traffic
was
lights
walking
to
at
the
the top there,
yeah.
and then you can see the tattoo shop at the top there. So this was clearly a huge blast if this tattoo shop was damaged beyond repair, and it's essentially covered a huge portion of that street. So it really puts into perspective how significant it was. And
So why do you think he's a 5G conspiracy theorist?
well, I think partly his background in tech was part of the reason why the FBI was investigating it, because I believe there were some local Nashville news stations that were interviewing people who had been interviewed by the FBI to kind of gather what the FBI were investigating based on. And they were saying that the FBI's line of questioning was solely focusing on the 5G conspiracy side of things. They weren't investigating any other angle. They weren't investigating even whether it was just a suicide attempt. It was purely that.
So the
I
FBI are
gather.
pretty convinced that that's the reason.
I seem to think so, yeah. And from what I've gathered from the statements from some of the neighbours and people who worked with him, that's kind of corroborated by what they've said as well. Sorry, I've got a really dry throat.
That's fine.
It's Christmas. I've not been too healthy. So, Donald Cochran said, the US attorney for Tennessee said, "We've come to the conclusion that the individual named Anthony Warner is the bomber, and he was present when the bomb went off, and he perished in the bombing." And he said that Warner's home was in nearby Antioch and was searched by federal agents on Sunday. They still don't know his motive, and it's too early for this to be discussed publicly. Apparently, according to some people he worked with, he quit unexpectedly in December, just via email without providing an explanation, and they said that this was really out of character for him, and they think that it alludes to some kind of problem in his personal life because he didn't give a reason and because he was so polite in his life, that they believed that there was some kind of underlying reason or motivation behind it. But supposedly law enforcement have stated that they had no awareness of the guy whatsoever, and they had no idea that he was going to have an attack. I believe his only charge was a cannabis charge in 1978, so he's pretty much off the radar as far as the police are concerned. And he'd never been monitored or known by the FBI until they actually made the link between his RV and the one used in the attack. We've got a statement here saying, "He is either a criminal mastermind or a dude who flew completely under the radar." One law enforcement official stated that he sounded like an extremely sad guy who wanted to die in an elaborate fashion on Christmas Day. And I think that is also a good point, that it happened on Christmas Day, which seems to suggest that there's some kind of...
Was it maximize attention or something like that?
I think it's a bit more poetic. I think that's just me as a psychologist speculating his mindset, but I think the fact that it's
because he's lonely.
Yeah, he's lonely on Christmas Day, and I mean the opening lyrics saying about being lonely and going downtown.
Yeah.
It seems to be that he's giving away his motivation by playing that song, or at least that's my kind of speculation. Obviously, we don't know his motivation for certain
But that
yet.
would fit.
Yeah, I think it would fit. I think the explanation provided that he was a lonely guy. He wasn't married, didn't have any kids. He lived alone. Apparently, he gave away his property in his car to his ex-girlfriend, I believe. I think a week before the attack was carried out. And there's also news that he had been given a cancer diagnosis. So I think the circumstantial evidence seems to point very strongly that this was some kind of extreme send-off. And although it's too early to speculate on the 5G stuff, I think there's certainly reason to believe that the FBI's line of inquiry might come up with something interesting, particularly because it was the AT&T building that was targeted most severely. Because supposedly about 75% of all of the AT&T networks affected by the blast were back up on Sunday, but in the local area, all of their networks went out for a period of a few days. So it was quite a significant attack, and it's clearly had an effect on the local area, but perhaps not to the extent that he might have hoped. So the Sunday Times reported that Warner, in a week prior to his suicide attack, told his ex-girlfriend that he had cancer, and that was why he was giving away his stuff. And he just said to her that he was going to spend a week in the woods, staying in a cabin or something, I assume, with his dogs, and he didn't give anything away about his intentions to carry out this attack. And there have been lots of statements looking at the response of the police, and they've been saying that the police have perhaps put themselves in danger far more than they should have, but for example, the mayor described them as heroes for doing so, because they were kind of instrumental in clearing the area in the attack. So they were knocking door to door and trying to clear people out of buildings, making sure none of them were kind of within the blast radius. Although, as you can see from that BBC video, they
some of them not taking it that seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, if it's just some RV making a bunch of noise, like, it's not necessarily a bomb. If it was myself, I'd be like, whatever. Right? You're not actually expecting it to blow up.
I know. I think they would have probably viewed it with some kind of speculation, especially as it was happening on Christmas morning as well. They thought maybe this was just someone making a bad joke or something. And they were also at the same time responding to a shots fired call. So I think that they viewed the RV driving around playing this message as secondary to the shots fired call, which had diverted a lot of the police attention. And if we could go on to some of the responses, you can see that people have been responding, as you could probably expect, by trying to point out and win political points by saying that if he were Muslim, people would be asking lots of different questions like who radicalized him, and where did he go for his religious services, how did he get into the country, what videos did he watch, was his family involved.
But there's the thing, like, they are, and they didn't find a motive, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I saw some, like, that. I'm assuming this guy's leftist. I can see on your notes it says he's Daily Beast columnist, which gives me a hint, but I did see some right-wing things as well, people suspecting that he might be an anti-Far bombing or something like this, but none of that seems to be true.
It doesn't necessarily seem to be politically motivated.
It's just a lonely guy who did something stupid.
Yeah, essentially. And although the 5G lead is the main FBI follow-up, there is also a link to him and AT&T, because I believe his father, who later died of dementia, used to work for a company that was taken over by AT&T, and I think he lost his job in 2015, just before he died. So it might be that he just held some kind of personal grudge towards AT&T rather than it even being motivated by any kind of ideological motive. It's really not quite clear, to be honest.
All right.
But if we go on to another Muslim activist, he says, no one is asking what church Anthony Warner attended. No one wonders why the white community didn't report him for suspicious activity. No one asks why white leaders don't denounce this suicide bombing. White privilege is being viewed as an individual liable only for yourself.
What? Like, he's a martyr for the white movement or something like this. Like the White Liberation Front that's suicide bombing AT&T buildings.
Yeah, what a terrible take. I mean, we have no reason to think it was even political at all, let alone anything like that. So,
but this is very typical. People just jumping on bandwagons, even when there's no bandwagon to jump on.
Well, when there are points to be scored, I think people will take any opportunity, whether it's warranted or not.
This is why I try and not comment on terrorism instances whenever I can, because there's actually a great story of what happened in Spain at the time. Though I think it was a train bombing. Someone had blew up a train, and the government at the time instantly tried to blame it on Islamic extremism. If they, fact check me if I'm getting this wrong, but it turned out it was actually Catalan extremists, and then they were able to be like, oh, so then the government got it wrong, and they lost the subsequent election because it was too embarrassing. Like the fact that he tried to jump on a bandwagon that wasn't there.
I didn't know that.
So
I remember vaguely hearing about a Catalan bombing, but I didn't actually look into it very much at the time.
But it exposes people like this that just they're not interested in finding what the truth is. They're not interested in solving the problem. They're just here to push something.
I mean,
because he knew he would be found out wrong if it was wrong. So why even put this out?
It's it's unnecessary, and also I think people know that they're not going to be held accountable for this sort of thing.
No.
And they feel like they can get away with it, and they can score these cheap political points while they can.
Like, this guy's just the white community. Like, okay, like, I'm sorry we didn't report this guy that no one knows, and Jesus, sorry.
Yeah.
But you said this had a thing to Dominion.
Yeah.
So this is pretty sketchy, but you wanted to mention
it was a really tenuous link, so I would like to clear it up that there's no actual evidence so far that's been found that's linked it to Dominion. I think it was just speculation as soon as it happened, because it targeted the AT&T building, who were carrying out some kind of audit on Dominion machines, but that's not happening in Nashville. So unless he was just targeting AT&T in general for that, but that's not particularly feasible, because that particular one was not being used. So.
But that lifeline hasn't been fully gone into yet, whether or not it was AT&T. But
yeah,
okay. But I just like someone mentioned in the chat. Like, imagine if the siren was, someone Allahu Akbar, and then you could make an inference. But I love the idea that his siren would have been, God, if he was a white nationalist bomber, I don't know, you will not replace us or something. Like, then you'd have a reason to tweet this. But no, obviously not. It's just
I mean, of all of the songs he could have chose as well, I don't think. The one he picked would be the one you would go for supporting that point, would you?
I want to send a message. What are you going to play? Downtown.